Abiy Ahmed and the TPLF signed a peace deal in Pretoria. But don't be fooled, this was never real peace. It was just a pause, a breath, a tactical silence in a war that never truly ended. Because the truth is simple. These two forces cannot coexist. The TPLF won't disarm because doing so would strip them of their remaining influence. The federal government will not allow the TPLF back into the political sphere, knowing it would undermine its grip on power. And both sides understand one thing clearly. The other is working to eliminate them, not coexist. Each side knows the truth. The other isn't negotiating to coexist. They're positioning to eliminate. Which is why Pretoria isn't holding. Why Tigray is normalizing relations with Eritrea, the very force it once called its sworn enemy. And why, beneath the surface, war is quietly beginning to breathe again. Let's break it down. In November 2022, the world watched as the Ethiopian government and the TPLF signed the Pretoria Agreement. The war was over, or so it seemed. But the ink had barely dried before the deal began to crack. The agreement had two core promises. First, that constitutional order would return to Tigray, including the restoration of disputed territories like Wolka-it and Raya. Second, that the Tigrayan forces would disarm, demobilize, and reintegrate, known as DDR. But from the start, both sides interpreted the deal differently. The federal government believed Pretoria was a surrender. TPLF would lay down its weapons, abandon political ambition, and return to the federation as a passive region. The TPLF saw it as a transaction. Return our land and then we'll consider demobilizing. Neither side got what it wanted. And neither side trusted the other enough to move first. But even if all disputed land were returned to Tigray today, even if the federal government handed back Wolka-it and Raya without resistance, it still wouldn't resolve the crisis. Because land alone doesn't guarantee power. From the TPLF's perspective, giving up their army is political suicide. Without a military, they would become just another sidelined region. Another Benishangul Gumuz, on the map but off the table. And that's a fate they cannot accept. For decades, the TPLF didn't just participate in Ethiopian politics. They dominated it. From 1991 to 2018, they were the architects of the Ethiopian state. Now they are expected to return to the system they once designed, but this time as guests. To them, disarmament isn't peace, it's exile. It's a declaration that their chapter is over. Meanwhile, the federal government sees a still-armed TPLF as a threat that could reignite war at any moment. From Addis Abeba's view, disarmament is the only way to ensure lasting peace. But for Mekele, disarmament would be the end of political relevance. So both sides stall, they delay, accuse, and maneuver. And while they play for time, the political map shifts in ways no one expected. How about Eritrea? Just 2 years ago, Tigray and Eritrea were locked in brutal conflict. The Eritrean army joined the war against the TPLF, helping the federal government come out with upper hand. Hatred ran deep, personal, historical, generational. But in politics, permanent enemies don't exist, only permanent interests. And today, TPLF and Eritrea are slowly warming to each other. Quietly, strategically, through intermediaries, activists, and former fighters. No treaty has been signed. But old grudges are being set aside. Why? Because strip away the history. And Tigray and Eritrea actually have little to fight over. They're not competing for Addis Ababa. The Algiers Agreement settled their border dispute. Their interests no longer collide. Abiy, meanwhile, made a costly miscalculation. He hoped peace with TPLF would drive a wedge between Tigray and Eritrea. He believed he could draw TPLF into an alliance against Asmara, but that backfired. By excluding Eritrea from the Pretoria process, Abiy alienated his wartime ally. And now the script has flipped. TPLF and Eritrea are no longer enemies. They are becoming partners. united not by friendship but by shared distrust of the man in Addis. And that's not the only new alliance forming. In the Amhara region, the Fano militia is rising again. Once an ally of the federal government during the Tigray war, Fano now sees Abiy as a betrayer. They've turned their guns toward the center. Thousands have died in battles between Fano and federal forces. And here, too, there are whispers. Fano and TPLF, despite their deep animosity, may be quietly coordinating, not as allies but as forces with a common enemy. Add to that the divisions inside Tigray itself, and the picture becomes even more volatile. The TPLF isn't just under pressure from Addis, it's being squeezed from within. Near the Afar border, a new Tigrayan armed group has emerged. Tigrayan by identity but not aligned with the TPLF. They reject Mikel's leadership and accuse the TPLF of domination Tigray's government. The group is small in number and inconsequential at the moment and isn't entirely grassroots. There are growing signs it may be receiving quiet support from the federal government, part of a broader strategy to fracture Tigrayan unity and chip away at the TPLF's influence from the inside. And through it all, the country is unraveling. Diplomatic tensions are escalating as Eritrea and the Ethiopian government trade accusations. Fano is destabilizing the Amhara region. OLA is in control of vast areas in Oromia. Tigray is quietly rearming and strengthening. Addis is overstretched, outmaneuvered, and increasingly isolated. Pretoria didn't fix any of this. It didn't bring justice, reconciliation, or long-term compromise. It gave Ethiopia a break, a breath, a pause. But a pause is not peace. And now the illusion is fading. Abiy Ahmed and the TPLF are two forces locked in opposition, not just politically, but ideologically. Abiy wants a centralized, obedient state. TPLF wants federalism, autonomy, and leverage. Abiy wants to erase TPLF influence. TPLF wants to recover what was lost, or at least prevent total erasure. No treaty can reconcile those goals. No ceasefire can fix that kind of mistrust. No handshake can undo years of blood, betrayal, and ambition. So the war is paused, but the conflict lives on in whispers, in alliances, in every border town and military base across the north. And the longer the stalemate continues, the more inevitable it becomes that the silence will break. Because under this system, in this context, Abiy and the TPLF cannot coexist. One must retreat, one must surrender, or the countdown begins again. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of the fragile peace in Ethiopia, support the channel by hitting the like button. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Can these two forces ever find common ground, or is the next confrontation already in motion? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep, unfiltered analysis from the Horn of Africa and beyond. Stay informed, stay grounded, and watch this space because the next chapter is already writing itself.